This meeting is being
throughout
recorded.
throughout this ecosystem than have 100 network connections, because I think the amplification that is done for your own platform, when you have people that really care about you, that really know what you do, that really know who you are and can speak on your behalf, is going to take you a lot farther. Because you can't be everywhere at once, and building those relationships is going to be so powerful long term to whatever your business may be.
Yeah. So these are all great things, but I have to ask the question, what if you're an introvert, moving into that physical networking event, and you see the room filled with 50 to 100 people, or even in this virtual space, you're introverted and don't particularly have, the motivation to get out there. How do you approach that, Loriann?
The best advice I can give you is practice. I know you may think practice what? Practice talking to people who you love, who have your back. And I always say, if you practice with people you love and people who care about you, they're going to help you. Say to them, listen, this is not my thing. I'm terrible at networking, but I want to try some things out. Will you give me some honest feedback? Will you tell me, did I look awkward? Did I sound awkward? What would you do differently? Practice. I can't stress that enough. Now, some of you might say, well, like, I don't even have those people in my world right now for whatever reason. And that's okay. Go to the grocery store, go to the movie theater, go to Starbucks, strike up a conversation with the barista. Oh my gosh, I love your lipstick. And just go from there. The grocery store, those folks are working hard every day. They're on their feet, bagging groceries. Pay them a compliment. Just practice. And I always say, practice when the stakes aren't high. Like if the barista says, thanks, and that's it, okay. But if you're doing that in a networking event and something falls flat, you miss an opportunity and you don't want to do that. So I would definitely give that a try, that practice. And if you're really uncomfortable, start practicing if you have an animal at home, because you'll be surprised how you could get some cues back from your dog or whatever. I mean, a cat probably isn't going to be the best. A dog usually works a little better. But again, it's just getting comfortable. Stand in front of a mirror. Am I smiling? That can go a long way, especially if you're not comfortable in these situations. Now, the other thing I would say is if you are going to a physical event, and obviously I'm not an introvert. I don't know if you can tell that, but I am not. So I have been the wingman for a lot of my introverted friends. And that's a really nice way to get into the conversation. Talk about it ahead of time. Listen, this is so uncomfortable for me. This is your jam. Can you help me out here? And then ask that person, like, introduce me, help me. And then, being mindful, when can you jump into the conversation? Derrick talked about that in the virtual space, what's happening that I can jump in. If you're with somebody who's really good at that or who's a little bit more extroverted, it can help ease that transition. And if any of you have ever listened to or read anything by Simon Sinek, he talks a lot about that. Align yourself with an extrovert. If you're an introvert, it'll carry you a long way until you get a little bit more comfortable. So
that's fantastic. Yeah, great. One thing that I love to do is if someone's wearing a name tag, I love to use their name. So Loriann, thank you so much for this service. Thank you so much for how you've helped me. And that immediately kind of removes that barrier and allows you to have that authentic conversation. Derrick, I know you're not an introvert. So how do you approach these situations, or what are your recommendations?
Yeah, no, I mean, actually, I am a very naturally introverted human being. Becoming an extrovert was a lot of work. It was a huge challenge. I get like the worst social anxiety ever. So, I would say the first advice I have people is like, give yourself grace, be patient with yourself. There are so many days, weeks where I have an event that I want to go to, and that day I'm not feeling my best self. I'm not feeling up to the task. I give myself grace. I give myself patience. You know how many events there's going to be this year? I can bail on this one, right? Like I don't need to go to every single event. I can be patient with myself and allow myself, to have a bad day or to have a day where I'm not feeling up to being around a bunch of people and having those conversations, because I do like to be on when I'm in those situations. And if I know that I'm not up to that task, I'm not going to put myself in a scenario where I maybe have bad interactions rather than positive interactions because of how I'm feeling. So, be patient with yourself. And then, I have find what works for you, right? So I say that to say, are there events that you kind of just have to go to that are very massive? Yes, right? It just is what it is. But I seek out more intimate networking situations that I found that works for me, right? So I rather go to the smaller, more, maybe handpicked or be somewhere where there's a lot of people in the room that I already know, or something along those lines, where I know that I will have those folks that I already know that are my anchors that I can lean on, that I can go to in an awkward moment, or if I'm feeling like I don't know what to do with my hands sometimes. And at the same time, there's going to be people, because I know people in that room, there's going to be people in the room that I don't know that they know that I know that they will introduce me to, that will provide that warm intro that will make it easier for me to make those meaningful relationships. And also I think in actually the first time I met Jane was at a smaller event, and it does make it a lot easier at a smaller event to talk to other people, because you're like the only ones there, right? Like you have the drink in your hand, there's only like 20 people. And so it makes it a lot easier to have those conversations and just connect with other people. And so, find what works for you, be patient with yourself. And the other thing that I like to do is I have a playlist when I pull up to an event, I put my playlist on in the car on the way there. And I sit in the car, I do my breathing, and I kind of get in the game mode. I played college football. And the one thing you have to do when you play ball is you got to get ready for the game, and networking for me and meetings for me, that's all the same thing. I got to get my mind right to go in and do what I need to do. And so that works for me, right? So just find your rhythm, find your game plan.
That's great. Come with your full self. Know that there's situations where you have to put yourself first. Find your game plan. Go in, as Loriann said, with someone that might have some street cred that can help facilitate some, initial introductions. That's great. And make sure you have a playlist, a pre-networking event playlist. And Derrick, you're going to have to share that out with all of us.
A lot of
you have
Robert, can I jump in really quickly?
Yeah,
I did have something in the chat box that I did want to share with everyone. And it kind of talks a little bit about knowing your why. But before you go into that networking event, really set an intention. What am I hoping to gain?
Yeah.
And I've always been of the belief I would rather walk out of that event with one strong connection versus 10 transactional, sort of robotic type of situations. And so setting that intention and getting your mind straight with that. Like, I'm not trying to sell $1 million here. I'm trying to meet one person who could open doors for me. And if I could do that, I'm a success. And so I think that has a lot too, to give yourself some grace. You're not there to try to tackle the entire room. That would be impossible. So again, set that intention really strong, put your playlist on, get yourself ready, and then get into the situation.
Yeah, totally. And you have to climb the ladder one rung at the time. You can't network with the expectation that you're going to get to a CEO or major stakeholder or decision maker. Network your way up and set that intention and expectations that you're going to do that. So we're having a great conversation. You have a great conversation and connection at a networking event. How do you keep it going? You have your formal goodbye. How do you continue that conversation and continue to move things forward, Derrick?
Yeah.
I'm
sorry,
Derrick, you want to jump in?
Yeah. I mean, for me, honestly, it's being okay, with allowing the conversation to end, right? I think a lot of people feel a lot of pressure on continuing the conversation, which is fine. But be okay with like a natural conclusion of a conversation, or like when you feel the social cues or you feel like you're running out of things to say, like be comfortable leading the end of the conversation. Like took me a really long time, but like I'm so comfortable being like, hey, this is great, like we should grab coffee sometime or something like that, right? Like just end it. Because if you have like a nice meaningful interaction, the last thing I want is for it to then grow into a stale, awkward interaction because I stuck around too long, right? And so, you know, you got to know when to end the conversation and to you know, kind of move on from to another group or even just leave. I leave all the time. I love Irish goodbying. It's my favorite thing in the world to do. So, you know, I have a few meaningful interactions and I leave because then I can't like have any awkward interaction. I'm like, ooh, I went 3 for 3 tonight, baby. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I'm gone. So yeah, that would be my one quick tidbit.
Yeah, and you know, it's great. Hello can plant the seed to mutual outcome. That's awesome, Derrick. Loriann, what do you think?
So a couple things. Try to make a note of something memorable, unique, something they said, because that's going to be your lead in after the fact. Hey, we met at this XYZ event. You were talking about whatever. I was really intrigued by that. That can keep your conversation going. Again, those little things, you know, you remember they had a great tie or they had a funny joke or they, you know, whatever it is, make a note. We all have smartphones. Take 2 seconds to go jot that in your phone, voice tap, whatever you do, but make those notes because, and I'll share this as an example. When I first started doing sales and I was out cold calling, I'd collect all these business cards at these events. And then I'd come back to my office and I'd play this like game. I'd have them all there. And then I'd be like, okay, now what do I do? Like, where do I even start with all these business cards? What am I going to do? So then I made it my intention to say, okay, I'm going to connect with one person that I can have one memorable interaction with that I could use to jumpstart future conversations. And the other thing I would say is asking that individual as you're wrapping up, you know what, this was so much fun. I really enjoyed talking to you. Is there anybody else who shares the same passion you do that would be great for me to talk to? See if you can get another name out of it. And then, you know, that can kind of help even open a door. You might say, hey, I got your name from Derrick at this networking event, and he thought that you would be helpful in what I'm, you know, looking to find out, whatever that might be. So that's another opportunity to find ways to keep the conversation going.
Great. So we've listened to our playlist. We're ready. We've done our research walking into a networking event. We have someone to co-pilot with us, but when that moment comes, when you have the opportunity to continue that hello and talk to someone in a meaningful way, what are your tips? What do you do, Derrick?
Yeah. So, and I'm pretty. I try to be pretty good at not bringing up what I do or like what services I offer unless I hear like a very natural segue into like what I do and like what service I offer, or if I'm asked, right? Just because, and I'm pretty sure most people on this call can attest to it. Like lawyers can be so pushy, and you know, can just really be tone deaf, and just all they care about is making the sale. I personally care more about getting to know somebody and building the relationship than like selling them on my services. If me and you know each other for 5 years and you never used me once, like I don't look at that as some like bad thing, right? And I remember when I first started out as a lawyer, like people were like, oh, like you're not out here to make friends. Like, you know, like if they're never going to use you, like they're wasting your time. Like, no, like that's stupid. That's absolutely stupid because like, once again, you don't know who is going to lead you to the relationship that could be a large client, right? You don't know who could just end up being a really good friend that will benefit you in personal ways or, you know, other professional ways, such as your professional development, right? Mentors and people that have like a different perspective and lens. So I'm very bad for this question just because I hate talking about what I do. And when I do, you know, I try to be very pointed, right? Listen to what that need is or what prompted you to want to talk about your services and be pointed. Don't go in some long spiel. I get secondhand embarrassment every time I hear somebody talk entirely too long about what they do, because it's just like, man, like they don't want to hear all that. Like find an elevator pitch for this. Like if you can't say this in 10 seconds, 30 seconds, then like it's probably, you know, you need to work on that, you know? So keep it sweet, keep it short. That's a great time to kind of set up like potentially in your follow-up, as Loriann was saying, like to bring up like if there was kind of like that natural segue, they had a need or they were interested in something that you did, to bring that up and maybe have a more pointed conversation later on about how you can add value for them via your services. But that's a terrible thing for me. I can't really speak to it too much.
All right, Loriann, help Derrick out.
Yeah, so let me help you out, Derrick. So a couple things to think about. People don't necessarily care about or buy features.
Yeah.
It's the benefit, the with them factor. What's in it for me? Derrick, what is in it for me being in a relationship professionally with you, right? What is that all about? And so you have to be able to connect with people on an emotional level. And I really love the elevator pitch concept, because let's think about this. If somebody says, Loriann, and I did do the introduction to give you some background, but if somebody meets me out and they say, Loriann, what do you do? And I say, oh, I'm a corporate trainer for RiteAid. Oh, okay. But if I say, I inspire managers to be incredible leaders, to leave behind a legacy that really empowers people.
Yeah.
Shit, say more. Oh, sorry. Say more about that, right? That's kind of cool. That could kind of get my interest peaked. So think about that. Think about, how can I connect with someone in an emotional way? How can I sell some benefits? How can I whiff somebody with them? What's in it for me, right? That's something that's important. So you have to prepare. And Derrick talked about doing your research on who's in the room. Do your research on yourself. What is the value I bring? How can I, I'm a party planner. Okay. Maybe that's not so exciting, but I help people create memorable experiences so they can cherish for a lifetime, right? That's a little bit more intriguing. So those are things to think about. And then the other thing, I'm a big fan of watching people. So who are you intrigued by? Who do you think has charisma and really does this stuff well? Pay attention. What are they saying? A lot of times you'll notice they use names, right? And I saw some conversation in the chat box about that's the sweetest thing you could do for anybody, is use their name. So hey, Robert, thank you for asking me about what I do. And then you can get into that. But even that makes Robert lean in a little bit more. So anytime you can position yourself as that benefit and really sharing how you help others can really keep that conversation going. So again, it's tough, and a lot of, especially if you're introverted, that is generally not a space you like to be, is like, hey, look at me. No, I'd rather not. However, you can be yourself, be authentic, be genuine, and just find what works. And the only way to do that is to practice. You got to practice a couple times. You got to say to your friends, hey, does this sound corny? Does this sound weird? And if they love you and they care about you, they're going to tell you. Don't take it as a bad thing. Just say, okay, what would make you sit up? So those are some things that I always try to think about when I am out there and people ask me, what do I do?
Great stuff. So I have to throw you both a curveball. So when you're at that networking event and you've said hello, you've gotten that down, and you've shared more about your professional background, and the person you're having the conversation says, well, Derrick, Loriann, what is it that I can do for you? I want to help you. How do you get that golden yes? What do you do?
Yeah. Well, and I think
the happy dance.
Right. And this is also where some of the research comes into knowing the audience, knowing who you're talking to, right? Making sure you ask the right questions once you've gotten to that point. Because for me personally, right, this has happened to me. Very important person at a Fortune 50 company that I met at an event in Washington, D.C. Had happened to say exactly what you just said, give or take some words, right? And I felt bold enough and comfortable enough to say, well, hey, look, this is how I, see my professional development. And I completely understand if, you're limited in what you can do for me, but I was guide into mentorship through my path, and, where there's an opportunity, you providing me with work, because at the end of the day at a law firm, having work is really all that matters. Right. And he nodded his head and he goes, okay, yeah, cool. Let's set up a call for next month and we'll figure all that out. And he gave me a cell phone, and now I'm at a point where I can just text him. And if something happens in my life, I can just say, hey, this happened. What do you think? I can just get his advice, right? That mentorship. And it goes both ways. He'll ask me stuff about, I'm a young millennial. So he'll ask me all the time about things about corporate leadership that I don't like, and all types of different stuff, right? So it's a two-way street. But I think just knowing who you're talking to can help with what you're going to say to them, right? So if it's that person that has the authority to give you work, be bold enough to say it. Say, hey, I'm really looking, if you're selling a solution, I'm really looking for, new clients. I would love for you to become one. Just say that, right? Like, be very pointed, be very direct. There's nothing wrong with that, but also make sure you know your audience. Because if you say that to somebody who doesn't have that authority, then it kind of falls flat, right? Because they can't do that. So if it is somebody, who maybe doesn't have that authority, but has had a lot of great experiences, say, I would love to continue, developing a relationship and picking your brain from time to time on some of the, obstacles that I'm experiencing in my career. Or I would love to, Loriann, if you point from earlier, if you look on their LinkedIn, I would love for you to connect me with so-and-so in your network. I know you two are close, right? Like, you have that ability to kind of cater it to who you're talking to. But you got to be bold. You got to know what you want. And you got to be bold, and you can't be afraid. That is a moment that you don't get often, and you have to strike.
Great. What do you think, Loriann?
Yeah, I would agree with almost everything that Derrick said, for sure. And again, it's knowing that intention. What do I want, right? If you go into a situation and you're not sure how that person can help you, you're at a disadvantage. So you really have to think about, what can these individuals that I might be engaging with, how might they help me? What do I want from them? And it could be an introduction. It could be a brain to pick. You know what? I'm just really intrigued by how to talk to CEOs. And if you're willing to have that conversation with me, I would really love to open up that conversation with you to mentor, to help me. I think the other thing is really being genuine here and saying, you know what? I'm not sure right now because I'm just getting to know you. I would love a little bit more time to really interact and get to know what you do and how you approach your business, because I think there is an opportunity. I'm just maybe not sure right now, because you don't ever want to go into a situation to say, I want this, if you're not sure, and then that falls flat. So just be genuine. I don't know yet. I just met you. I think it's been a great conversation. I would love for it to keep going. Would you want to meet for coffee? Can we do a virtual chat? Whatever that sounds like, so that we can get to know more about each other. I think those are some things that can be super helpful and take some of that pressure off. Oh my gosh. And to Derrick's point, those are diamonds in the rough when you get them. And it's really hard not to be deer in the headlight, like, oh, and then you sort of do the verbal throw, like show up and throw up, like, okay, can't do that. Right? Do not do that. Whoa, I was not expecting that, but I'm super excited to hear you say that. Can we continue this conversation so we can take it to the next level, whatever it's going to be? So some things to think about.
Yeah, that's great. Fantastic. Great conversation throughout. And I've heard so many great pieces of advice, strategies, opportunities to leverage research, your network, use those around you to lean on in situations where you may be a bit more introverted. Great things. Derrick, Loriann, fantastic panelists to have as part of the conversation. I know we could keep going on and on, but I'll kick it to Jordan for a few questions from the group that's joined us.
Yeah, we've got some really great questions in the chat, and I think this is probably one of the most engaged chats that we've had in one of our Cafe Ws, so that's fantastic. First, I just want to circle back to something that Loriann said in the chat, and I think it's so important to remember. But she says, never underestimate the power of admins or front desk receptionists. They are the gatekeeper. So Loriann, can you talk a little bit about building those relationships?
Yeah, sure. Those are golden, and you need to keep them really close, and you need to really cultivate those relationships, because I know we talked a little bit earlier about building that ladder to get to the CEO. You will never get to that CEO if you do not go through their admin, their assistant, their whoever's at their desk, whoever that gatekeeper is. Those individuals hold tremendous power and influence. And so if you can connect, let that person know you see them, you understand them, really butter them up. And I don't mean that in a cheesy or condescending way, but really connect with them and talk to them and find out what makes that business tick and why they stay there and how they got involved. That is going to help you open that door. They're going to open it for you. But if you get off to the bad start with them, you're in trouble. I always have just a little something in my bag whenever I would be out doing cold calls to leave behind with that receptionist or that front desk person, really making them feel special, because they are. And if you think about the job they do, they're getting yelled at. They have people snapping. They have people really condescending because, well, you're just the admin. They hear that stuff all the time. If you can make them feel as important as they need to feel and should be feeling, that's going to go a long way. So please never underestimate that connection. And that's going to open a door that will be much more valuable because of their influence on opening that door. So
great. So we've had a lot of questions regarding virtual networking, and people are asking, have you been to a virtual networking event that's worked, and what can companies do to kind of promote good networking in the days that we're all on Zoom calls or other virtual meetings?
Yeah, I've been to a few, and obviously, the last 3 years, 2 years has been trial and error for so many people. I mean, we were abruptly sent to the virtual world, and it's been difficult, right? So I'd say I give everybody a little grace for maybe not knowing how to navigate it, and also for companies not knowing how to necessarily present the event. I did attend an event that was sort of in the metaverse, which I thought was the best event that I attended. And I thought it was great just because of the ability to sort of navigate a room virtually, in which, it wasn't necessarily random, right? Like the room had a very similar makeup to a physical space. And I could seek out who I wanted to seek out in the room a very similar way that I would a physical space. So I thought that was very helpful. Now, granted, we're not all able to join events or put on events in the metaverse. So, I think for more traditional, Zoom, I've had a few that were really good, but I think they were more intimate, right? And those are the physical events that I like too, is more intimate events where there's just less people, there's a little less craziness and talking going on. And, the event did a really good job at sort of cycling people through rooms, having some people be stationary, cycle people through rooms. I thought that was great, created more potential one-on-one, or small group interactions that I find to be more meaningful and intentional. So, I think the advice I would give is look for those meaningful, more intimate, intentional situations virtually. I think physically they're great, but especially virtually, where there's just, you can't really pick up on physical cues. You can't really butt in as easy when somebody else is talking. It makes it a lot harder to network virtually with multiple people. So really seek out and be intentional about finding those one-on-ones.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think intentionality is huge here. You have to create a space for connection virtually, whether it's putting a question when folks come into the room that they can talk about in chat, whether it's doing a round robin activity where, hey, we're going to go down the list, and it may sound a little trite, but what's the weather like outside your window? Where are you calling from? Doing things like anything that creates connection. So I often, and again, it's not necessarily everything is networking. Let me say that. Every time you're out in the world, you're networking, even in your own space with your own team, whatever that might look like. But I like to do some activities where I'll put up a picture of coffee and a picture of tea, right? Which one? I'll do a bird or a night owl, right? Little things like that where people can say, oh, okay, so Jordan and I both like coffee. Today we got on, Robert had a cup of tea, I had a cup of coffee, right? So who else are my coffee drinkers? What's your favorite coffee? Little things like that to start to build connection. So then I at least have something in this virtual space to say to somebody like, hey, I noticed you were drinking Starbucks, or I noticed that you're a tea drinker. What's your favorite flavor? I don't, whether you drink tea or not, doesn't matter, but you're engaging, you're interested in that other person. Other things to look for is there opportunity for breakout rooms. So you might label the breakout room by the subjects that you're going to hopefully talk about in this, whatever this whatever this networking event was, where you're, to Derrick's point, creating smaller, more intimate groups so that there's maybe 4 of us. And then, I think it's actually sometimes easier in the virtual space to break the ice because it's not that weird, awkward, everybody's kind of looking at you. I mean, we're all sitting in a box, a square, just throw something out there. So is it anybody else feeling a little awkward? I know I am. Boom, ice is broken, and now we can start some conversation. But I think people are getting better. And I think, to Derrick's point, there's some cool platforms that really, I've been on a couple where you kind of go to the tiki bar, and then you go out here and you're in like more of a lounge, like couches and stuff, and kind of gives you a different feel. It gives you a more real-time experience of what it would be like in an actual physical setting.
Yeah.
Great.
And last point, and for anybody who partakes, nothing wrong with just having a little bit of alcohol before one of those events on Zoom, right? Just feel a little loose, baby. It helps.
So I've heard, you compare networking to dating a little bit, and I wonder, and we've had these questions as well. Is there a timeline? Like, is it I've got to wait 3 days after I meet this person to reach out, like it is in the dating world? Like, how long should you wait after an event to connect with somebody, either virtually or, by phone?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's going to depend. It depends on how robust was is my opinion. How robust was the interaction? There are certain times where you just can't wait. I think what's more important than the timeline is, why am I reaching back out? Is it to further the conversation? Is it to follow up? Is it to just simply thank them? Hey, I really appreciated you taking time out of that event. Thank you so much. I look forward to connecting with you in the future. Let me know if you have opportunity. I think that's more important than how many days you wait, or, what does that look like? And I'm not really great in the dating world, so I'm probably the last person to talk about timeline. But I think it's more, what is it that you are trying to do versus when do you try to do it? And I think the other thing, Jordan, that really falls in line with the timeline is, to what end? How long are we going to continue this situation? And when does it become, I don't want to say wasting time, because it's never could be. Let me rephrase that. There comes a point when, are we meeting just because we're meeting and it's nice, or is there an end game here? And if there's not, that's okay, as long as you're okay with that, because you can invest a lot of time, effort, and energy in a relationship that's going nowhere, which is a lot like dating. Like, at what point are we going to move this relationship to the next phase? There may not be a next phase, and you've got to be aware and willing to say, okay, I'm going to, I think Derrick made the comment before, like, I'm just going to kind of tuck that in my contacts. It's there, but we're not going to continue to invest because I'm not getting a lot of return on it, and they probably aren't either. So those are things that come to mind when I think about timeline.
Yeah, that's all really good. And I think, like, it is very similar to dating in the sense of, after first date, right? And over the last year, I've went on a lot of first dates. In which, you kind of know, like, hey, is there opportunity here for this to go forward? Do I see that? Like, is there natural kind of organic ways in which we can work together, or where I can add value to them, or they can add value to me, whatever, right? Are they just a really cool person that I necessarily don't see anything going professionally with, but I would like them to be in my life generally? Like, is that a friend? You know what I mean? And is that somebody I just want to continue to just hang out with and add to my tribe, right? And then third, there's just the people that are just people, and that happens, right? And the one thing you have to do, and I meant to mention this earlier, but I didn't, and I'm happy to put it now, is you have to accept the awkward, you have to accept the bad, you have to accept the dead ends, right? That is just something you have to, if you go out there enough, right? If you go on enough first dates, or if you go, do enough networking, you're going to have a lot of bad experiences, right? You're going to have a lot of experiences that go nowhere. You're going to have a lot of awkward experiences, and you just have to accept that they're going to happen. If you swing 100 times and you hit 4 home runs, you hit 4 home runs, that should pay your bills for the year. I don't know, but you still had 96 other times that maybe weren't home runs, were pretty good, or were terrible, or were whatever, right? But people always say, if you bat 500, you still go to the Hall of Fame. So that's pretty cool. Just keep that mindset, keep chugging, and don't let those awkward bad moments ruin or outshine the good ones.
Great. Another question that I've found interesting, and it's especially timely is, we're in the middle of a pandemic, or hopefully we're coming out of, this level of, quarantine or this spike, and we're going to go back to in-person events. But what do you do if you're not necessarily comfortable shaking someone's hands, or how do you avoid people getting too close to you when you're still kind of feeling a little hesitant these days?
It will be interesting, Jordan, to see how folks react to that. I know there are some folks who I have come across with, even at the gym, who I've been friends with my whole life, known a long time. And you almost sense it as you're approaching, because their arm starts to come up versus their hand coming out. So we're going to do an elbow, or a fist, or whatever that might be. And I think, again, it goes back to authenticity and being genuine and just saying, hey, I know we're just getting back to normal here. I'm not sure I can even define normal, but I'm just not comfortable shaking hands. I hope you're okay with that. And, Derrick had said this a while ago. I heard him use this phrase, like, I'm not everyone's cup of tea. And if you want to shake my hand and I'm not willing, then we're going to have to agree to disagree, and I'll just move on to the next person. And again, you're going to have to accept that. The close talker, your stance is really important. I know this sounds bizarre, but if you can stand sideways and get your shoulder to lead, it creates and you put your leg back. I know this is weird. I should probably stand up and demonstrate, but that does help. And it does send a signal. That body language sends a signal. I don't want you in my space. Oftentimes I'll talk this way. Oh my gosh, it's so not right. So that they can't get near me because my hands are out here. So little things like that, I think, can help, but it's really going to be interesting to see how others navigate. I do think there's more acceptance of not shaking hands and not having that closeness. And, some people, it's not really top of mind, and they're going to go do things the way they always did. So I think just be prepared, don't let it throw you. And if you're not comfortable, just say, hey, it was nice meeting you, and then just step away.
Yeah. If I could jump in there, Jordan.
Yeah, please.
One thing that I've done is I looked up how to greet someone, in greetings throughout the world. There's a number of ways to greet someone without shaking their hand, just a lot of things, and it works. So, it's something cool to try, and something that might be a good strategy in this new environment. Sorry to cut you off there.
No, that's cool. I like that. I'm gonna put that on my to-do list. Find some funny ways to do it too. Just be a little goofy with it. But yeah, no, I mean, I think it goes back to being patient with yourself. If you don't feel comfortable in those certain situations, and it is something that's a true concern to you, be patient with yourself. Physical events maybe aren't for you right now, and don't feel that pressure to have to go. The one thing that I think the pandemic taught me is that networking events are necessary, but not in the volume that I once did them. I think that if I create 5 to 10 meaningful relationships each year that I didn't have the year before, I feel a lot better about that than the vast amount of relationships I was trying to create in prior years before the pandemic. So, be patient with yourself, be comfortable, don't push yourself too far out of your comfort zone when it comes to your health and safety, because to Loriann's point, some people, I've been to some of these physical events, and some people, they just don't care. And, mask mandates at events aren't always enforced. And, so on and so forth. So if that's a situation that's going to make you feel uncomfortable, then just remove yourself from the situation. Beyond that, body language, I think, is huge. Just don't be afraid to lead. If you want an interaction to go a certain way, lead the interaction. So to Loriann's point, put your elbow out before they can reach their hand out. I personally, I'm a large person, all 6'4", 335 pounds of me is hard to get close to. So I think I just naturally have a little bit of distance that's usually put. But that being said, I now am a lot more, arms folded when I'm talking to people, right? Because arms folded is a classic signal of I'm not opening you to come closer, right? I'm keeping you at bay. Be a little bit farther away from me, right? And also another thing is when you, at least me, when I see somebody who's keeping their mask on at an outdoor event or something like that, I'm just more mindful of, okay, this person has kept their mask on. They are clearly, concerned to some extent of the risks associated with attending this event. So I'm going to be mindful, right? And I'm going to read that cue off rip, and maybe I'm going to put my mask on before I go over, and like that alleviates some of that pressure for them of me being close to them and having a conversation with them. Or, you know, I'm going to stand a little bit farther away, or I'm going to lead with my elbow, because, you know, that's just I think an important thing is, yeah, it's like, you don't want people to be close to you, but make sure you're reading the cues of others as well, right? Be mindful that social awareness is so important.
Great. That's, you know, fantastic advice, especially as we're hopefully coming to the other side of this here soon. But I think that's a great place to end this. We've gone through this hour so extremely fast. So I just want to say thank you to Derrick and Loriann for joining us in this conversation today. And thank you, Robert, as our in-house relationship manager at IW. It's been a great conversation. And I just want to invite everybody back next month for our next Cafe IW, where we're going to dig in a little bit deeper into lifestyle media and what that can mean for you and your business. So again, thank you for everybody, and have a great day. Stay warm and stay safe.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
That was fantastic. That was so good. Robert, you did an excellent